Hey fellow engineers, Jamie Z here, and today I want to mix some hip-hop vocals in my new VSX headphones using the VSX plugin in room emulations so that I could get the right EQ and dynamics for the vocal so that it translates on all systems. So let's get started. We'll listen to the raw vocal here.
Yeah, days you wake up and pray that this should go perfectly.
And I'm also going to monitor through the NRG NS10s, since I think NS10s are a great speaker to get your vocal level in the mid-range right.
Maybe you'll buy a dip on some cryptocurrency.
Start with Fab Filter.
Should we all want security? Maybe you'll prove that you may really need that university. Well,
roll off some of the mud down here in the 100.
Been a wild year, not a dry eye. How many slices will this devil's pie?
And on these NS10s, I'm really hearing the high end of the vocal in these S's cut through.
Yeah, days you wake up and pray that this should go perfectly. Staying up.
He's staying optimistic. So I'm gonna do a little dynamic EQ, about 3 dB here.
Yeah.
And let me loop that part.
Days you wake up and pray that this should go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty.
So you see the dynamic EQ is gonna grab the top end. This vocalist also used the Slate microphone. So I'm gonna put on the virtual mix rack here. And let's go choose a microphone, which will also help us on our quest to EQ this vocal perfectly. So I will throw on the classic tubes mic and let's audition some microphones.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic.
This one sounds a little muddy.
Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry.
The C800 sounds great, opens up the top end.
Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury. Maybe you'll buy a dip on some cryptocurrency.
Okay, so I think that helps the EQ a lot.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind.
But I'm still hearing more S's. So in the dynamics, I want to put on the de-esser, set it to high frequency only, about 3K.
Go perfect.
And just dial it in.
Staying optimistic even go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty.
Okay, that sounded pretty good. Now, this vocal is very dynamic.
Staying optimistic even with no certainty.
If we zoom in on the track, we can see there was no compression to tape and a lot of dynamics in the vocal. So we're gonna want to control those a little bit so that it comes out a little bit louder. So in the dynamics here, I'm gonna use one of my favorite compressors, which is a distressor. And I also want to put on the SSL dynamics, which are great for hip hop vocals. So let's dial in some compression now.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally.
All right, the SSL is sounding great, but I'm just gonna bring the mix down, about 50%.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with.
And I'm gonna bring the output out to adjust.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no.
And then let's dial in the distressor here. Let's put in some of the high pass filters.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally.
All right, now I wanna do a little bit more EQ. The vocals are sort of blending with the track a little too much, and especially on NS10s, they should be punching through. So I think we need more mid-range.
Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally. Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury. Maybe you'll buy a dip on some cryptocurrency.
So that little bit of mid-range is really coming through on these NS10s.
Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up.
But I feel like I could use a little bit more air. So let's add some air, but let's change the room here. So I'm gonna go to the Howie Weinberg Mastering Studio to try to get the high end right on this vocal.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up.
Now instead of EQ, sometimes I like to just use exciters and harmonics to brighten up vocals instead of just adding high end EQ. So I'm gonna use this ozone exciter, and I'm gonna put these both on tape, and I'm gonna dial in the top end.
Go perfectly. Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally. Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury. Maybe you'll buy a dip on some cryptocurrency.
Okay, now the vocal's bright and it's cutting through, but I want a little more chest, a little more lower harmonics. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna turn on my parallel bus, and my parallel bus is gonna go to a tape machine. And now we're gonna just run through different settings on the tape machine, and this should adjust and bring us some of the low end back, because tape usually is really good at adding low end. So here we go.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty.
Now let me mute the vocal. We're pre-fader so we can hear just the tape effect.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally. Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury. Maybe you'll buy a dip on some cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it sounded nice, sounded a little bright, so I'm just gonna change the bias to try to dull it a little bit more.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up.
Now I'm just gonna dial in the parallel till we get some of that thickness.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally. Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury.
All right, and now I just want to control the S's a little bit more after I added that exciter. So let's just put on the Avid de-esser and just dial in some of this top end.
Go perfectly,
just a touch.
Staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally.
And for hip hop vocals, I like to use some wideners to create a little bit of space, but still keep the vocal in your face. So I'm gonna turn on my widener here. I'm gonna open up the pitch plugin, and in here, the left, I'm gonna bring down 9 cents. The top, I'm gonna bring up 9 cents. And this delay, I'm gonna dial in here. Let's see, about 15 milliseconds on the right, 10 milliseconds on the left. It's gonna add a nice widening. Now to check these effects levels, I wanna change rooms again to dial in the effects. So here, I'm gonna go to the Steven midfield room and just dial in the width until I can barely hear it and it's widening the vocal, but I'm not hearing the effect.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally. Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury. Maybe you'll buy a dip on some cryptocurrency.
All right, that sounded really good. So let's do a little A/B here. So I will bypass all the effects and all of the plugins.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally.
And now I'll turn them all on.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let the direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down
and then
the
finally,
windows internally.
I'll go listen
Maybe
to
you'll
them
make it big, the heat lift your mercury.
in the Apple
Maybe you'll buy a
earbuds.
dip on some cryptocurrency. Maybe you'll find a job, should we all want security? Maybe you'll prove that you ain't really need that university. Well, let's lean into it like
yeah,
a
the vocals
skydive.
cutting right through.
Long way from my ties by the high tides. Been a wild year, not a dry eye. How many slices will this devil's pie divide by? Time flies when you're scrolling down the timeline. Just
Check on a
imagine
couple
if they
more
would've
speakers.
cut your Wi-Fi. It's okay to feel down, bro. Why lie? My mind's eye trying to channel Biggie back in 9-5. Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty. Don't let
Yeah, the top end's there. The S's aren't too loud.
Roll down the windows internally.
Dynamics are
Maybe
right
you'll
in your
make it big,
face.
the heat lift your mercury.
And let's also try in the Archon Studio.
Go perfectly, staying optimistic even with no certainty.
Hearing the good
Don't
chest
let the
voice there.
direction that the wind blows worry me. Open up, roll down the windows internally. Maybe you'll make it big, the heat lift your mercury. Maybe you'll.
All right, there we go. EQing vocals and doing vocal effects using the different VSX room emulations to fine tune the vocal. Hope you guys dig it. Peace.